What's up, gamers? We just got a data slate. I was hoping to get this out earlier today, but I forgot, and I had some other stuff going on. So, in other news, your boy is officially helping out Team USA. Yay, go me! So that's pretty exciting stuff. Um, let's go ahead and get into it. We had a data slate coming out this morning. I think there's been a lot of people crashing out, not just online, but a lot of different personalities, a lot of different content creators and influencers in the 40K space have been looking at this and saying this data slate sucks, and I'd have to agree with them. We'll go ahead and talk about it a lot more, but I think in a lot of ways this data slate is mostly defined not by what is in the data slate as much as what is not in the data slate in a lot of different ways. And so it just kind of means we are in a very awkward position overall. But let's go ahead and talk about what is actually in the data slate before we start doing any of that analysis. So to start off with, we'll go ahead and talk about the FAQ updates and stuff. There was nothing new for guard in this what do you call it, in this data slate. But if you somehow missed it, this did happen a couple of weeks ago, but we got a couple of small changes. The first one is Grizzle Company lost the reroll ones to wound if your target is on an objective. I've played plenty of games since this. You don't really feel it hardly at all. It does. You feel it mostly on your tanks when they're shooting at things on objectives, but our tanks are so good at killing the things that they tend to be shooting at that are on objectives that it doesn't really matter. We didn't need the bonus consistency there. And Scions reroll ones to wound anyway, so is what it is. The other big thing is the snap to it interaction has come very clear now. You don't care about how many orders you've already given. You can still do snap to it regardless of what your order cap has been already. So this is in what do you call it? This is a continuation of the inspired command FAQ that we got during the index, and such that we didn't care about the cap then. We still don't care about the cap now. It has been officially added to the FAQs, so no more discussing about that kind of stuff. Buffs to the guard. Nothing. We didn't have anything directly happen to us. That was good. Nerfs. We had the Rogaldorn Battle Tank going up 10 points. I went from 250 to 260. And then the Rogaldorn Commander, which was previously 275, went up 15 points, but is now up to 290. I'm not going to lie, this is. You definitely feel it, but it's not super bad. The biggest thing about this is, a lot of lists were running two Rogaldorn commanders, so a lot of lists are going up like 30 points, and then some lists were going up like 20 points because they're only running the Rogaldorn battle tanks, especially your Lord Sora style of lists. In general, this is like you downgrade a thing instead of like if you're taking like a unit of Aquilons or something, you could turn it into like a battle line unit. Or if you had like a Gaunt's Ghost or something, it can also be a battle line unit. If you had a battle line unit, you can downgrade it to like a Cyclops and an enhancement or something. You're generally going to be losing about half of a battle line unit somewhere. So figuring out how to do that with the least pain is kind of the biggest thing that we have to do. But we were so strong already that losing 30 points is kind of getting off light. I was definitely expecting that this data slate, I was building lists assuming that we were going to lose 100 points of stuff. So the fact that my list went up 30 points and I already had 10 dead points of enhancement meant that, like, I make like one change in the list and we're still chilling. Everything else is still working just as good as it used to. Okay, let's go ahead and start talking about things that probably should have been nerfed but weren't. These are things that are still too good, things that are still very, very exciting. There are lots of things I could include here. You can include Bulgrin. In particular, is probably one of the other really big winners. Attilan Rough Riders actually losing the reroll ones to wound on objectives actually does hurt a decent amount. But other things that were not nerfed but probably should have been. Kazarkin. Kazarkin have been one of the best data sheets in the Guard Codex for forever, basically since they were reintroduced in 9th edition. Kazarkin have been super, super strong. Meltamine is very good. The ability to give themselves orders is very, very good. They're just a Swiss Army knife that does a little bit of everything. Ogren Bodyguard, and I'm going to include Nork Dadog here, have been making waves recently in terms of just making your durability of 20 bricks way, way higher. And then the other really big one that I was very surprised didn't receive any nerfs was the Cadian shock troops, especially the 20-man units that you're starting to see. I don't think the 10-man needed to change at all, but the 20-man getting a discount for Cadian shock troops 11 through 20 is kind of crazy. Um, Losing or getting this discount does mean that Cadian bricks with Castellans and a Cadian command squad, and sometimes an Ogre bodyguard, they are a cornerstone of recon. And they have started becoming very, very popular in grizzled builds as well. And the fact that they are as cheap as they are mean that they are really efficient damage dealers with the volume of plasma and lascum that they can put down range. The other really big thing that I was kind of expecting to get a nerf, but it didn't, was the fact that Grizzle Company gives you an extra order for every single one of our officers, and I think this was a really easy way to nerf a couple of things in Grizzled. In particular, I think it would have been a pretty big nerf to Scions, which are one of the absolute best units in Grizzle Company. They do a ton of damage, they are incredibly easy to use, they will kill about 10, or they will pretty easily kill 10 Marines if they're not in cover and still kill like 7 to 9 of them if they are in cover and not on an objective. It is a lot of damage coming out from these models, and the main reason that they are so easy to use is because they drop and they give themselves 2 orders instead of giving themselves 1 order, which is why you don't see them as much in a couple of other detachments. The other big thing here that we could be including that I'm not showing on screen is recon. I was definitely expecting some direct nerfs to recon element the detachment. In particular, the first thing that I would have looked to potentially change is the way that the reactive move works. The fact that it is flat 6 is a lot. I would have probably looked to change that to either like D3 plus 3 or D3 plus 2 or even just D6, making it less consistent so you aren't able to plan around where your guys are going to nearly the same degree. Definitely surprised that none of these things ended up getting changed. So they're all still very good. You should still be looking to include them in your lists. Things that probably should have been buffed but weren't. There are so many things I could have put on this one. Lord Marshal Dreer still hanging out. He's doing his best. Leonor's Eradicator and Leonor's Commander still not worth taking. Friends don't let friends take Leonor's Commanders. They do not look good. Don't play them unless you have a really, really good reason. Before I go too far, I do want to say, like, every single time I'm, like, seeing a conversation about the Leonor's Commander, people are like, the ability sucks. Shoot on death doesn't do anything because I always die in melee. Firstly, skill issue. Secondly, if you're saying this, you probably didn't play during the index where the tank commander rule was oppressive and it still had all of the same issues as before. The issue is not that shoot on death is not a good rule, it is an amazing rule. The problem is that it does less damage now because the Demolisher cannon has 2 less shots than it used to, and we're paying more for it. So not only does it do less, we are paying more. So it's like a double whammy. But realistically, if it went down 15, 20 points, you would definitely start seeing them pop up in lists. It's just too expensive right now. It's surrounded by too many other good data sheets. Okay, Armored Sentinels, another one. I mean, there's so many things we could put in here. Um, yeah, there's a lot. People know what they are. Super heavies are actually doing pretty decent. Indirect is actually doing pretty decent. I don't think those things really should have been buffed, but there are just a bunch of models and data sheets in our range that are just not being played. So continue to not play them. Okay. Things that are interesting because their competition got nerfed. So one of the biggest things that we were seeing before was there is a bit of a divide between people who are playing Rogaldorn Commanders and people who are playing Lord Solar Leontis. And Lord Solar Leontis with 1, 2, maybe 3 Rogaldorn battle tanks is more interesting now because it went up less points than the Rogaldorn Commanders. Each Rogaldorn battle tank got nerfed by 10 points, and each Rogaldorn Commander got nerfed by 15 points. So if you are playing like Lord Solar Leontis and 2 Rogaldorn battle tanks, that went up 20. Whereas if you're playing the 2 Rogaldorn commanders, that went up 30. So there is a little bit more interest in potentially playing Lord Solar. This is oftentimes being done in 2 Dorns and 2 or 3 Vanquishers, or you could run an Exterminator. There's a couple of different ways that you could potentially run a couple of extra Russes or a couple of extra Dorns. Um, The fact that Tao has gotten some pretty big glow ups as well does mean that the blank could be really relevant, particularly up against hammerheads. If we're starting to see more railgun hammerheads, it will be a big reason to potentially look to shift towards Lord Solar with Roboarm battle tanks in order to blank those individual massive shots. Um, Gaining shock troops once again. So the fact that the Rogothorn got nerfed, there's a pretty direct like points like exchange that you can do for a Rogothorn battle tank and 20 Cadians, a Castellan, a Cadian command squad, and I think you also get an Ogre bodyguard. It's very, very close in points to what the Rogothorn used to be, and it's a little bit cheaper now, and they are still very, very good in terms of playing the board. They still do some pretty good damage. The things that are threatening to them, which are usually going to be Marine bodies, they are very good at killing Marines. So the 20 Cadians is looking a little bit better. Lastly, Scions. Same thing. You're starting to see there's some people who have been testing a little bit more with Scions on foot, who are just playing the board, especially if you're worried about your opponent just running at you. So there are definitely ways to deal with that with the Scions. They are just really, really good. As one of our other primary damage dealers gets a little bit worse, Tempestus Scions, which are another one of our major damage dealers, not getting touched at all, suddenly look even better in comparison. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about some other changes across the ecosystem. The first one is Necrons, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit at the beginning when I said that one of the major things, one of the major issues people have with this data slate is not what's in it, but rather what is not. And let's go ahead and talk about the changes that happened to Necrons, which have been one of the big boogeymen for the meta for the past couple of months. Firstly, Star Shatter. Basically, every stratagem, I believe it's every stratagem that could have potentially affected Catan in Star Shatter, no longer affect monster keywords, which is basically just Catan in the army. And Necrosar Amintar, the new fights first guy who gives sustained, no longer gives sustained to Catan. Before we talk about the points, the Silent King, I believe this is every single one of their auras on the Silent King, also no longer work on monsters, which again is basically just Catan. So Catan losing the reroll once to hit, reroll once to wound from the Silent King, losing the +2 move from the Silent King, and also losing access to sustained from Amintar is actually like a decent amount of like consistency that has just been taken out. Anybody who's rolled like, if you're rolling like 8 attacks that hit on 2s, the number of times where you roll like, oh, I just rolled 3 1s, there goes a ton of the damage coming out of this unit. You know how big those reroll 1s to hit and wound can really be. A lot of the consistency is gone, and some of the opportunity to spike high by rolling, 2s, rerolling 1s, sustained. Wonder where that would be. You've lost some of the opportunity to spike high with things like the Nightbringer, the Void Dragon, and the Transcendent Catan. Um, so these are all like, they do matter. They aren't the biggest thing in the world, but the big thing that we're going to be looking at is the fact that every single Catan went up 10 points. And if you were taking them in Pantheon of Woe, we had the mandatory, what are they called? Like necrodermal bindings, I think, whatever the technically not enhancements that you have in that army. Those all went up 15 points. So if you were taking any kind of Catan, they went up 10 points in every detachment and 25 points if you're taking them specifically in Pantheon of Woe. This is not enough. One of the big things about this, so from a guard perspective, which of course if you're watching this, I'm sure you're trying to watch this from the guard perspective, these changes actually mean a decent amount in the guard matchup. A lot of the consistency that the Catan would have going into our vehicles, going into just like trying to do damage, trying to fight their way out of getting charged by 10 Kazarkin, a lot of that consistency is gone. They do not have a lot of that anymore, meaning that it is easier for us to tag them up. They're not going to be killing as much, and they're also just not going to be doing as much damage. The other thing that they are not going to be having access to is they will not have access to the reactive move in Star Shatter, which is a pretty big deal because we are a shooting army. After shooting them, they can no longer run away from us. So this is from the perspective of a predominantly shooting army. These changes actually matter like a decent amount. Guard actually does get a decent amount of tools in order to be better up against the Catan builds, or rather, they are not quite as good against us. However, the problem with these changes is that if you were playing melee armies, they barely moved the needle at all. Melee armies were charging you. They didn't care about the reactive move. Melee armies were charging you. They're still going to have to charge into the Necrosaur. Um, the sustained aura, like, and the reroll once hit and wound is a little bit of loss of damage, but the problem wasn't so much that the Catan were going to fight their way out of a lot of these units, which they still mostly do. But the problem that you were running into is actually the fact that melee armies can't kill these guys. And the fact that you are losing 10 or 25 points means that there's very little change. There was a really funny GIF that someone made, I believe it was from Team Ireland or Team Scotland, somewhere in the British Isles, where they were like, okay, here's my changes to the most recent Dataslate. And they picked up a destroyer. Their Star Shatter list or their Awakened list lost 20 to 40 points. Cool. They will lose a single model, which was just there to go do a secondary. Uh, these changes are not very big in general. However, with some of the other armies that are still in the game that we're still going to be able to fight them, like Guard or Tau, which was one of the few armies that were actually able to post a positive win rate into Necrons, or Sisters, armies that are predominantly shooting are going to have a better time into Necrons. The problem is that Necrons are still going to be very, very oppressive to a lot of the melee armies that are running around in the meta. Speaking of new stuff and new Xenos factions, Tau are going to be really, really good. Tau are already this army that was kind of hovering on the like getting a decent number of event wins. They had a decent win rate. They were like the mid 50s, and they just got firstly they got a small buff to their stealth suits. I don't know why this happened. They were already looking pretty good, and you were still taking one of them at 110 anyway. You're probably going back to taking two of them in basically every list. So most lists went like they got an extra 10 to 20 points of space to play with. But the other thing is the Twin Lance released, and the Twin Lance released at 160 points. I was looking at this data sheet, and firstly, it's just crazy. It has so many rules on this data sheet that you can kind of do a little bit of everything. But one of the major things that I've heard some people talk about, but not everything, is let's imagine that you have an objective here, okay? And there's like a wall like here or something. One of the major things that we are going to be looking at with this that is a major problem that didn't really exist before is Tau was like okay at playing primary. It's not super, super good at playing primary, but now one of the things that you can do now is that this is the middle objective. The Twin Lance can like hide over here behind the wall, making sure that this is, you know, a 6-inch move. And if your opponent doesn't go ahead and put something on this objective, Twin Lance just comes out and is like, oh, +5 primary, please. And you can do this. There's like some boards, especially on Games Workshop terrain, that are just so open that nothing other than like something with lone op can really ever stand on the objective. And the Twin Lance can stand on the objective by standing 6 inches away from the objective, which is absolutely nuts. The other big half of this is suddenly, let's imagine that we have the objective once again, and I did in fact put something on this objective. Let's say that I put a dude here in order to 9-inch screen and make sure that nothing can rapid ingress on the objective. The Twin Lance can rapid ingress here. They can rapid ingress more than 9 inches away from our model and then move 6 inches in order to put OC on the objective. And if we go even further and you have an objective here and I do put a model here, let's say I went ahead and put something on the objective so that everything around is screened out. What is it? It needs to be 15 inches away. Well, now our opponent can just kill us because we have to put models out in the open just to deal with the fact that the Twin Lance is going to scam us on primary at some point. Notice that I have spent absolutely no time talking about the damage output that this unit has, the mobility that this unit has, the fact that it is so good at just other utility. I have only talked about the crazy implications that this model has for primary. And this came out at 160 points. This is one of the best data sheets in the game. It does things that nothing else in the game can do. Um, this model definitely needed to come out at least 200, like to start, and then it'll probably end up being like 250 points. But I've heard other top Tau players say that they would play this at 300 points. So this is an absolutely nutty data sheet, considering that Tau was already doing relatively well into Necrons, and considering that they just got a small buff otherwise, when basically everything else that was good took some nerfs, and they just got one of the most cracked data sheets in the game. We should be expecting that Tau is going to be one of the best armies. Necrons, not really changing a whole lot, are still going to be one of the best armies. Okay, some other small changes that we have going on. We will spend a little bit more time talking about Space Marines because they took some small nerfs. The Redemptor Dread, the Combi Lieutenant, the Repulsor Executioner, and the Wardens of Ultramar all went up a little bit. Fun story, I thought this was the price point that the Lieutenant with Combi Weapon was anyway. For the longest time, I thought he was just 85 points, and when people told me he was 70, I kind of freaked out for a little while. I definitely had a bit of a crash out. But losing this, or losing some points here, does mean that a lot of Space Marine lists are going up like maybe 40-ish points in a lot of different ways. And then the Repulsor Executioner, this going up while this is just also 10 points. The Repulsor Executioner was like one of the most efficient models in the game for dealing with Catan because you would pop Storm of Fire and you'd get +1 AP, and you'd also get Ignores Cover, and you'd have reroll hits and +1 to wound. So you would actually do like a single Repulsor Executioner. I want to say the number is like it would do like 10 damage on average to a Catan, which is nuts. That is a lot of damage. So the fact that it's going up is interesting. It probably could have just been this points anyway, but small thing. Potentially the bigger thing is another thing that was not in the change was there's no more Marnius Calgar. The original Marnius Calgar in Gravis armor, who's got the two buddies, where he's just kind of hanging out, and they're like, "Hey, get down! I'm gonna give you a 4-up Feel No Pain." That version of Calgar is gone from the MFM. He does not have legal points. Neither does the weird version of Zacharias where you have to like move next to him instead of his unit in order to get the reactive move. So both of them are just gone from the MFM. They are still in the app, but my TOs and a lot of TOs that I've talked to so far are expecting that they will be removed and you will generally just not have old Marnius Calgar and Zacharias. Losing Calgar is a decently big deal because old Calgar, Gravgar, was nuts. He was super, super good. He did a little bit of everything. Fallback, advance, shoot, and charge is just crazy, crazy rules. But the fact that he had the 4-up Feel No Pain and was just randomly super durable was also a bit of an issue. You can still play Marnius Calgar in Armor of Antilocus, or whatever the Terminator armor is called. He's actually still going to be pretty good. You'll probably still see him played in Victrix builds, but it's definitely going to be a bit of a shakeup in a lot of the Ultramarines builds they're used to seeing. With all this said, I do think that Ultramarines in general are still going to be very good. The fact that they do have some pretty good shooting platforms, the fact that you still have access to Gilliman, and new Marnius Calgar and Terminator armor are definitely mean that they're probably still going to be one of the better Marine variants in the game. But maybe not quite the best. But they are definitely still going to be very strong. Okay, other changes. All of this does not matter. But we'll go through it really quick. Votan and Tyranids got new characters. Their characters cost too much. So maybe your like diehard friends around you will be like, I want to play the new guy in Delve Assault. I want to play the new guy with my Hormagaunts and Dermagaunts and whatever. And you're like, neat. Cool. Doesn't really change anything. They are just a lot of points. Sanguinary Priests can now lead Blade Guard veterans. That's interesting. I know a couple people have been talking about like whether or not they want to include this, giving them 5-up Feel No Pain to the Blade Guard vets who are already 3 wins apiece with a 4-up invul. Does mean that they are surprisingly durable. But it's not the... I mean, it's okay. It's definitely one of those things where you will need more testing. Other things that have happened. Kairos and Lord of Change both went up 10 and 15 points. This is like not meaningless. And then the Infernal Puppeteer also going up 15 points. You're looking at a lot of times you're looking at like Kairos and then three birds, which is 45 points, and then the Infernal Puppeteer going up 15. So this is like 10 plus 60. So this is like 70 points altogether taken out of a lot of the Scintillating Legion lists, which is like a unit of Nurglings and a half. That's like a Beast of Nurgle, something like that. So they're going to have to like downgrade one thing or remove one thing. It's not nothing. Uh, but I know a lot of people, there's definitely plenty of talk about whether or not Scintillating Legion is even better than Demonic Incursion towards the end of the patch. Still very good, still a strong build, but going to be a little bit less powerful than before. Custodian Guard, if you have not been paying attention to what has been going on in the competitive scene, there is a list going around that is 3 Land Raiders and 27 Custodian Guard. I think it's 2 5s. No, it's 3 5s and 3 4s. That Folger Pile in particular was making popular. Uh, it lost 10 points on every single one of those, so that is 60 points there. Then you lost 10 points on the Inquisitor, which is another 10, and then the Inquisitor Draxus went up another 15. So this is an 85-point nerf to the Custodian builds, which are very, very powerful. However, if you are astute, you will notice that 85 points, you have this is 40 points per model for Custodian Guard. So if you get rid of 2 Custodian Guard and go from 27 to 25 Custodian Guard, that is 80 of the points right there. So you're looking at having an extra 5. If you can find a way to spend those 5 points a little bit differently, you're golden. Random stuff. Eldar, Astrobin got nerfed for reasons and stuff. Wraith stuff went down a couple points for reasons and stuff. The Seer Council, maybe it matters. I haven't heard anybody really talking about it, so I don't know if there's more. Knight stuff went down, but these are kind of irrelevant. The Grey Knight Terminators went down. Still not great. Everybody I know who's been talking about Grey Knights are like, yeah, that's fine. Tormentors, the 10-man going down, kind of whatever. Flawless Blades, the fact that they are now at 100 points is kind of interesting. This is starting to get to the point where it's cheap enough where you're just like, maybe I take them anyway. And then the Emperor's Children Terminators, similar thing. They're now, there's been a lot of like, this data sheet is so cheap, you should just take it. It doesn't matter what it does. It's just there. And both of these are very rapidly approaching that point of like, hey, you should just take them because they're cheap. This doesn't really matter. Maybe the racks matter a little bit. This guy is bad. They did change the CSM Weaponized Hatred, so the second oath, it went down from 60 points to 35. However, you do need a line of sight now, so it's definitely like you actually have to protect the model in ways that you didn't before. I don't even know who this dude is. This doesn't matter. None of it really matters. Okay, so where do we land in all of this? What are we looking at with the changes overall? Guard was, if not the best army in the game before, absolutely a top 3 army. I think that is hard to dispute for anybody who's been paying attention to the competitive scene. So if you are playing in your games, recognize that Guard was really, 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 really strong. Guard is still very, very, very strong. We lost like 30 points, and basically everything else that was arguably better lost more. Ultramarines lost a lot of points. We lost more, or rather, we're kind of like about the same amount that we lost from Necrons in terms of points, but Necrons lost rules that we did not lose. So we, relative to the Necrons, we should be better, and our matchup into a lot of like the Star Shatter builds pretty directly did get better. Our matchups into the Awakened lists is about the same as it was before. We both lost about the same amount of power there. So we are definitely in a spot where like Guard, like maybe this is anybody who's watching who's like not a guard player, we were like, it was like maybe Necrons, and then number two was like maybe let's say Ultras, and then three was us. Guard was number three. Um, the New World is probably we're probably the best army in the game. We didn't really lose a whole lot. A lot of our very powerful tools like Recon and Scions and 20 bricks of Cadians are still very, very powerful. Our Vanquishers are still very powerful. If you want to go towards Rogue with our battle tanks in order to play up against Tau, we have that opportunity to still do that. Other things that are contesting for this spot in we're going to put in Tau. Tau was already an army that was kind of matching us band for band. They had similar number of unit counts. A lot of their stuff was getting pretty good relative to its point cost, and they just got one of the best data sheets in the game. So Tau is looking very, very strong. It's almost exclusively Montcalm, so this is one that you need to be ready to play in a singles environment. Three, Necrons. This is an army that our matchup actually got better into, so we will probably be beating this one a little bit more consistently. But the thing that I would be looking here is make sure you know your Awakened Dynasty matchup. Understand how Necron Warrior bricks can revive models and what the movement they can get off of that and what other silliness that they can do. Our Star Strider matchup has gotten better. Our Pantheon matchup has gotten noticeably better. Um, but Necron's still going to be doing us a lot of favors in suppressing a lot of the more melee armies that are running around in the game. And then four, I don't know exactly what Marine is going to shake out. It could be Black Templars. Black Templars Bastion is pretty good. Ultramarines might be the best because Ultramarines are, again, one of the armies that can best fight Necrons. Tau is pretty good at fighting Necrons, so we are expecting that this is probably going to be like our big four. And then maybe, I don't know, you have like Blood Angels and CSM are pretty interesting down here. Uh, but if you're playing Bulgrin, you just like beat these instantly. If you still have like Scions or Dorns, like these are not threatening matchups for us in any real way. But our big thing here, we need to be ready to fight Tau. We need to be ready to fight Necrons. We need to be ready to fight Marines. That means we need to be ready for shootouts, or we just have so many bodies that they do not have enough bullets for us. So Recon is looking pretty good. A lot of infantry-focused Grizzled builds are looking pretty good. Doombolt is still looking great. You can still play 2 Dorns, 3 Vanquishers. You can still play 2 Dorns, 12 Bulgrin. These are all still going to be pretty good lists overall. But as always, I talk about this every week. If you don't want to play Recon, which might be the single best army in the game, I would look at Doombolt. Doombolt to me is just one of the most well-rounded singles lists in the game right now. There's still a lot of variations you can do. You can look at 1 Dorn, you can look at 2 Dorn. Honestly, you can play like Recon but Grizzled in this style if you're looking at some of the things that like Tucker Ricky has been playing in teams environments. So overall, still just very good stuff. So if that's what you're looking for things to play over the course of this next data slate, I'd be looking at Recon or Doombolt as the best ways to potentially play. That's it, everyone. It's been an interesting data slate for sure. We're looking pretty good as a faction overall, but it is going to be a bit of a weird meta for a little while. So just remember, we are quite good. We just might have some tough matchups because of how Tau is doing a lot of the things that we want to do, and they're also doing it very, very well. For now, though, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Joushi Rambling about the newest data slate, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.